It was past 3 in the morning, and exhaustion clung to me like a damp, heavy blanket. A long shift, the stale smell of sweat and gasoline in the car, and the faint buzz of the AC that sounded like it was begging to be put out of its misery. I was wrestling with myself to call it quits when the app's notification pinged like a hook in my ear. A new request. Close, just 3 streets over. An old, abandoned gas station, the kind that's been shuttered at night for 20 years, haunted only by the ghosts of stray dogs. I told myself it had to be a mistake. Who calls for a ride from a derelict gas station at 3 a.m.? But I accepted it, because I was tired, because I needed the money, because I was cocky. When I pulled up, there was nothing but darkness and the damp reek of wet asphalt. The gas station stood like a rusted corpse in the middle of nowhere, its neon sign cracked, pumps caked in grime, and the kiosk windows staring at me like blind eyes. Only one person was there. A man, average height, wearing a brown leather jacket that looked like it was stitched from some dead animal's hide, and a hat casting a shadow that swallowed half his face. Under the sickly yellow glow of the lone streetlight, it was like part of him had melted into the night. I opened the car door. He got in. The second the door shut, a sharp stench of cheap cologne, mixed with something like gasoline or maybe turpentine, flooded my nose. The air in the car turned thick, like breathing inside a wet coffin. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. The GPS just showed an address. A back road, 20 minutes out. A place even the map seemed unsure of. I started the engine. The motor growled like a wounded beast. The tires slid on the slick asphalt, and every few seconds, a metallic clink came from the trunk. I didn't know what it was, but each time I heard it, it felt like someone was dragging a nail down my spine. 2 minutes in, I felt him staring at me through the rearview mirror. Not like normal passengers who glance and then bury themselves in their phones. His gaze was cold, like a blade slowly scraping my skin. I tried to avoid it, but his eyes had a pull, like they were pinning me in place. My heart started pounding, like it wanted to claw its way out of my chest. To break the silence, I forced out, first time using the app, silence. For a moment, I thought he hadn't heard me. Then, in a gravelly voice, like it was crawling up from a grave, he said, "No, but probably the last." His words hit like a cold stone in my gut. There was something behind them, something I couldn't grasp but couldn't ignore. Like a door in my mind had cracked open, and all I could see beyond it was black. A few seconds later, he started talking again. His voice was soft, but there was a venom in it, like a snake brushing your skin before it strikes. You know how vulnerable drivers are. Nothing between you and the back seat. Just a knife, a rope, a moment's lapse, and it's over. You can't even turn around, because if you take your eyes off the road, you might not get them back. My mouth went dry. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. He went on. "Who do you trust? A name on an app? An address? You didn't see who I am, didn't see what's in my pocket. You just accepted because you were tired, because you wanted money, because..." He paused, and the air in the car seemed to freeze. "You were cocky." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his hand slip into his jacket pocket. My heart stopped. I didn't know what he was pulling out. A knife? A gun? A syringe full of God knows. Or maybe just a lighter. But in that moment, anything from that pocket felt like a death sentence. I wanted to slam the brakes, fling the door open, and sprint into the dark until my lungs gave out. But my legs were welded to the pedals. I just kept driving like a robot with only one command. Suddenly, he said, "Skip the next turn. There's another route. It's faster." I checked the GPS. The route hadn't changed. Trying to sound calm, I said, "No, this is the way." Quietly, but firm, like an order with no room for argument, he said, "I said turn," and I turned. The road was dirt, pitted with muddy ruts that sucked at the tires. Tall trees loomed on both sides, their branches like bony fingers reaching for the car. The headlights only lit a few feet ahead, and beyond there was darkness. Darkness that felt alive, like it was breathing. The engine's hum was drowned out by the rustle of leaves and the wail of wind slipping through the window cracks. 5 minutes down that road. No words, no destination, just darkness and the sound of my breaths, now racing to keep up with my hammering heart. I kept expecting something to leap out of the woods, or worse, something to rise from the back seat, its breath hot on my neck. Then he said, "Stop here." I stopped. The headlights were still on, but their light seemed to dissolve into the black. Around us, nothing but trees and silence, a silence that felt like it was chewing on my soul. I turned to look at him, but the shadow of his hat still hid his face. All I saw was a smile, like it had been carved with a razor. "Turn off the engine," he said. My hand shook. I didn't want to. The headlights and the engine's rumble were the only things making me feel remotely alive. But his voice, that calm, deadly tone, was like a noose around my throat. I turned the key. The engine died. Now it was just my ragged breathing and a faint tick-tick of something metallic, maybe from inside the car, maybe from his pocket. "You know where this road goes?" he asked. I couldn't answer. My throat was full of ash. "Nowhere," he continued. "It just keeps going until you decide you're done." He reached into his pocket again. A glint of moonlight caught it. A small knife, its blade seeming to drink the light. My heart exploded in my chest. I wanted to yank the door open, but my hand wouldn't move. My body wasn't mine anymore. "One question," he said. "If I ended it right here, you think anyone would find you?" Silence. Just the tick-tick of that metal thing, now definitely coming from his pocket. A watch, maybe, or something counting down. My body was ice. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just waited for the sting of the blade, the crack of a gunshot, but then something shifted in the air. He set the knife on his knee, like he'd only wanted me to see it. His other hand went to his pocket again. My heart lurched, but this time he pulled out a wad of cash, more than the fare could ever be. Without looking at me, he tossed it onto the passenger seat. The rustle of bills in the silence was like a scream. "I'm getting out here," he said, his voice still soft. He opened the door. A cold, damp breeze rushed in, his cologne mixing with the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. He turned for a moment, and the moonlight finally hit his face. Black eyes, bottomless, and a smile I couldn't read. Then, without another word, he stepped into the darkness. The night swallowed him whole. No sound, no shadow. He was just gone. For seconds, maybe minutes, I was frozen. My hand still gripped the wheel, my breath short and jagged. The money sat on the seat, crumpled bills like some kind of cruel joke. I don't know what his deal was, why he showed me that knife, or why he dragged me down this godforsaken road. All I know is I was lucky he didn't do anything, that he let me go. I started the engine. The roar was like a lifeline in the silence. I spun the car around, tires skidding in the mud, and floored it back toward the city. The headlights barely cut through the dark, and every second I expected his shadow to lunge out of the trees. My breath stayed trapped in my chest until I saw the city lights. At the first street light, I finally dared to glance at the passenger seat. The money was still there, but now, under the streetlight's glow, I saw something else. A small scrap of paper tucked under the bills. In messy scrawl, it read just one thing: "Don't be cocky." I'm Tyler, and this happened just a year ago, right after I moved to Dallas. My new place was on the 4th floor of an old apartment building. Not fancy, but quiet, the kind of spot where you could hear your own thoughts. The hallways were narrow, lined with faded beige carpet, the walls carrying a faint whiff of stale paint, and the elevator always let out a soft whine when its door slid shut. I'd come from a small town, chasing a fresh start, and everything here felt normal enough. Everything, that is, except the unit across from mine for B. It was a void. No lights, no sounds, no delivery boxes stacked by the door. Its rusted doorbell hung silent, untouched, like it had been forgotten for years. One afternoon, trudging home from work, I spotted 4B's doorbell lying on the hallway carpet, detached like a chipped tooth. Without thinking, I picked it up and propped it against the wall beside the door, figuring I was doing someone a favor. That night, around 11 p.m., a soft tap came from my front door. I thought it might be a neighbor or a misdelivered pizza. I opened it. Nobody. But there, on my doormat, was that same rusted doorbell, placed dead center. Taped to it was a scrap of paper, scrawled in messy handwriting. "Please don't touch it again. We need it." My breath hitched. I scanned the hallway. Empty, just the dim flicker of the ceiling lights. I grabbed the bell and note, tossed them in my kitchen trash, and tried to convince myself it was a prank, maybe some kid in the building messing around. But a knot of unease settled in my gut, heavy and cold. The next morning, I cornered the landlord, a gruff guy who always reeked of cigarette smoke. When I asked about 4B, he frowned and said, "That unit's been vacant for 2 years. Nobody's rented it. Hell, we lost the keys ages ago." I suggested someone might be squatting, but he just shrugged. "If you're worried, call the cops." For a week, I tried to let it go. But every night, just past midnight, a sound cut through the silence. A sharp metallic click like a lock turning, coming from 4B. At first, I wrote it off as the elevator or the building's ancient pipes. But it was too consistent, too deliberate, always at the same hour. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. It was 12:30 a.m. when the click came again. I cracked my door open and peeked in a hallway. No one was there, but 4B's door was ajar, just a sliver, enough to let a faint draft slip out. My heart raced. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept closer. As I neared 4B, another sound stopped me. A low murmur, like someone talking to themselves, words muffled and disjointed. I pressed my ear to the door. The voice sharpened. "Shouldn't have touched it. Now they know where you are." It was a man, his tone thick and labored, like he was speaking through a clenched throat. My legs turned to ice. I jerked back, my phone slipping from my hand, its light snuffing out as it hit the carpet. In the dark, the murmuring stopped, replaced by a slow, steady breathing, as if someone was right behind the door, ear pressed to the wood, mirroring me. I sprinted back to my apartment, slammed the door, and locked it, fumbling for my phone to call the police. When they arrived, I went with them to check 4B. The door was locked tight, but one officer pried it open with a tool. The unit was barren, bare wooden floors, peeling yellow walls, not a speck of dust or furniture. It looked like no one had ever lived there. The cops said it was probably noise from another tenant, and with no evidence, their hands were tied. They left, but that same night, the lock's click came again, louder, sharper, like someone wanted me to hear it. A few days later, I bought a cheap security camera and set it up in the hallway, aimed at 4B's door. The first night, it caught nothing. But the second night at 12:32 a.m., it recorded a man, thin, in a gray hoodie with a hood pulled low, obscuring his face. He stood by 4B, twirling that rusted doorbell in his hand, like it was a toy. Then he looked up, straight at the camera. His face was shadowed, but his smile, a crooked, uneven slash, was clear as day. He pulled a paper from his pocket, placed it by my door, and vanished down the hallway. I grabbed the note, hands shaking, in the same scrawled handwriting. "Tyler, don't hide next time. We'll find you." How did he know my name? My heart was a jackhammer. I told the landlord I was breaking my lease, that I couldn't stay. As I packed, I found something else. In my desk drawer, a rusted key, the kind that might fit 4B's old lock. It wasn't mine, never had been. Now, in a new house across town, I check my doors and windows 3 times before bed. But some nights, in the dead quiet, I hear a faint metallic click, too close, too real. And last week, in my coat pocket, I found another note, in that same messy scrawl. Tyler, keep the bell. We still need it. I'm Craig, and back when I was scraping by as a student at the University of Chicago, I worked at a rundown diner in the Loop called the Blue Door. It wasn't some trendy spot you'd snap for social media. Just a weathered brick shack with wobbly wooden tables etched with initials and a counter permanently stained with the ghost of overbrewed coffee. The crowd was a mix of cabbies, pulling all-nighters, and broke poets stretching a single cup of joe while scribbling manifestos until sunrise. I had the morning shift, stumbling in at 5 a.m. to flip on the ancient coffee machine, its steady hum breaking the pre-dawn quiet like a lullaby. That sound, as weird as it seems, was my safe place, my anchor. Fast forward a few years, and I was back in Chicago for a job interview, cutting through that old street on a rainy evening. The block still smelled of diesel fumes and damp pavement, but the Blue Door looked like it had been gutted. Its windows were sealed with crooked plywood, nailed up like someone was in a rush to hide something. The faded sign still clung above the entrance, its letters half erased by rust and grime. I stopped, staring. A strange ache hit me, not quite nostalgia, but a deeper pull, like a memory I couldn't quite grab. I chalked it up to sentimentality, shook my head, and moved on. But weeks later, something yanked me back. It was past 1 a.m., and Chicago after midnight feels like a parallel world. Long shadows stretching under streetlights, faint sirens wailing in the distance, streets that seemed to pulse under the moonlight. I don't know what drove me there. I wasn't planning to break in or snoop. It was just this relentless curiosity, like a voice in my skull urging me to take a peek. I parked my car in an alley a block away and walked over, the street deserted except for a scrawny cat that slunk into the dark. When I reached the Blue Door, my heart picked up. The plywood on the windows hung loose, unchanged, but then I saw it. A faint blue glow, like a flickering bulb, seeping from under the front door. My steps slowed. Maybe it was a streetlight's reflection, I told myself, or my tired eyes playing tricks. But closer up, the glow was real, spilling from inside the diner. I pressed my ear to the door, the wood cold and splintery. There was the unmistakable hum of the coffee machine, the same one I'd switched on every morning years ago. My breath caught. The Blue Door had been shuttered for ages, its power cut, the building abandoned. What was making that sound? Who was in there? I tested the doorknob. Rusted, freezing, but it turned with a grudging creak. The door swung open, groaning like I'd woken it from a long sleep, and the blue glow brightened, emanating from a corner near the old counter. I flicked on my phone's flashlight, its beams slicing through the gloom. Dust coated the tables and chairs, undisturbed, like the place had been frozen in time. Yet the sharp, warm aroma of fresh coffee hit me like a slap, filling the air. My pulse pounded as I stepped inside, the floorboards squeaking under my sneakers, each one sounding like a warning. Anyone here? My voice bounced off the empty walls, unanswered. I swung the flashlight toward the counter. The coffee machine was on, its tiny red light blinking faintly like a heartbeat. A ceramic mug sat beside it, brimming with steaming coffee, tendrils of vapor curling upward. But what froze me in place was the shadow, a man, tall and gaunt, standing behind the counter. For a split second, I thought it was my reflection in the cracked window pane. But no, he shifted, his head bowed, leafing through a tattered notebook in his hands, his thin fingers turning the pages with eerie care. "Hey, who are you?" My voice cracked, betraying my fear. The man raised his head, slow and deliberate, like a marionette on fraying strings. The blue light bathed his face, eyes sunken deep, skin sallow and creased, like parchment left too long in the sun. A crooked smile split his lips as he said, "Craig, you were always late for your shift." His voice was rough, like it was scraped from the bottom of a rusted pipe. I went rigid. How did he know my name? Where had he seen me before? I stumbled back, my heel catching on a chair, nearly sending me sprawling. What are you doing here? This place is closed." I tried to sound firm, but my words came out like a scared kid's. The man closed the notebook with a snap, setting it on the counter with ritualistic precision. "Closed. No, Craig. The blue door never closes. You just forgot your shift." He took a step toward me, his worn boots silent on the dust-caked floor. I aimed my flashlight at him. His hands were stained with dark brown splotches, like dried coffee had crusted into his skin, flaking at the edges. I bolted for the door, my heart hammering in my ears. But before I could reach it, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, like someone had kicked it from outside. I spun around. The man was closer now, just a few steps away, half shrouded in the counter shadow. "Where you going, Craig? Your shift's just starting." His smile widened, revealing yellowed, crooked teeth, like shards of broken ivory. I hurled my phone at him, hoping to buy a second's distraction, and threw myself at one of the boarded windows. The plywood was loose, giving way with a splintering crack. I tumbled onto the sidewalk, scraping my knee on the asphalt, but I didn't stop. I sprinted to my car, not daring to glance back. When I got home, I locked the door, double-checked it, and dragged a table in front of it for good measure. I didn't sleep, just sat staring at the wall, half expecting that man to step out of the shadows. The next day, I mustered the nerve to drive by the blue door. It was sealed tight, no glow under the door, like nothing had happened. I called an old regular, a cabbie whose number I still had, and told him what I'd seen. His voice dropped, heavy with something like dread. He said years back, there was a night shift worker at the blue door, a lanky guy who always took the late hours. One night, they found him in the kitchen, drenched in scalding coffee, like someone had deliberately dumped the machine on him. They never figured out who did it or why. But the cabbie swore that some nights, even after the power was cut, he'd see a blue glow from the diner's windows. Now, I take the long way around that street, avoiding even a glimpse of that rusted sign. But sometimes, when I'm alone, the smell of burnt coffee fills my apartment, coming from nowhere. One night, worst of all, I found a tattered notebook on my kitchen table, like the ones customers use to jot orders in. I opened it. The first page, in shaky, uneven scrawl, read, "Craig, your next shift is waiting." Since then, every night past 1 a.m., I feel it. Someone behind me, breathing, waiting for me to return to the blue door. The shadows are watching, and the road never ends. Will you dare to drive into the night, knowing what might be waiting in the back seat? Pick up the next fare. Test your nerve. But beware, once you turn down that road, there's no going back. Share your own chilling tale of the dark at #DriveTheNight and see if you can outrun the fear.